Let's go!
You know, the marketing machine is coming out because even Advent Children, of all things, this is kind of curious to me, because it's like, why would they release Crisis Core again and Advent Children, of all things? Why would they do that? Especially when it's like, you know, potentially spoilery. So it's very interesting. It's coming back to theaters. It's coming to theaters in Japan, and in February, I think the first showings in LA are February 21st. Advent Children's a really special movie to me because this movie was, you know, huge, right? Advent Children was huge. My opinion on it has changed a lot over the years, just because I've like grown up and I don't like things that are just cool. Right now, I still like things that are cool. I mean, fairly. But like the fight scenes, like everything about it was just quite literally exactly what I wanted. So anyway, this movie was like massive. It came out in 2005 and it was just unbelievable. Like the sickest thing ever. Although I will say, like I said, my opinion of its, you know, integrity has definitely gone down. While I love it, I still love Advent Children. I feel like I should make a video just talking about my feelings of this movie, because we're going to go see it again. It's like, did you recently watch it again? Dude, I don't need to watch Advent Children again, bro. I've seen this film so much. I've seen the complete version so much, which makes it a much better movie. But let's talk about that. In 2005, this shit was insane. That everyone was talking about it. I collected everything about it. Me and JJ watched it equally, like hundreds of times, all of the goddamn time. I also went to, at the Cinerama Dome, the US debut of the movie. It was essentially the first time they ever showed the film with the English dub. Nomura was there. The voice cast was there. I think Katase might have been there. And I also made it. We like stayed there for like 4 hours in order to make it in. Yeah, it was very cool. Like I was super enamored with this film, and I cannot wait to go again to go see it, just because it's been a while since I've seen it. As much as I admire this movie when it came out, and it holds a really special place in my heart, it is not free from, I'd say, criticism. Because the more as I became a relative filmmaker and storyteller, I started to really notice things that like I didn't like about it. And even when I first watched it, it was like, dude, I'm an FF7 fan, and even this movie feels hard to follow. But then an action scene quickly shows up, so it's kind of okay, and you're sort of into it. But my God, dude, the characterization of the way certain characters are portrayed in this movie really set like a negative tone for Final Fantasy VII. Everyone sort of like said that, oh, you know, Cloud is this like mopey sort of character. And that came from this film. Like, that was the characterization of Final Fantasy VII characters from this movie. So it had a little weird stuff going on with like storytelling, and it was almost just a big excuse just to bring Sephiroth back for a big epic Sephiroth fight, like all that kind of shit. As much as I like kind of disagree with some of the storytelling aspects of it, I think one thing that has held up very well is the visual elements, is the action sequences. They're genuinely great. Again, I think this movie has a really bad, an interesting plot, but a really bad story. The storytelling is just bad, man. It comes across as somebody that just doesn't have like much experience with it. And yeah, from what I understand, I can't remember if Nomura, he was definitely the director, but he was also, I don't know if he was also the writer. I think this movie is the perfect representation of Tetsuya Nomura. Does Nojima write it? Okay. All right. That also makes sense. Nomura is, as he is the director of the film, an absolute masterclass in visual combat, right? In like, it makes me realize how good Nomura is at showing how cool something can look through visual combat. You know, I really liked Kingdom Hearts when it came out, and that game visually was just on another level. It was insane to see how good it looked. He's the same guy that made the FF7 OG fights look the way they do. He's the same guy that made Final Fantasy 15 combat look relatively good, which it did. And he's also the same guy that made Final Fantasy 7 remake combat look the way it did too. He's a visual artist when it comes to like character engagement and combat. And he's also got a ton of other, you know, accolades under his belt. But this movie is the perfect representation of that. Because when you get the guy to like tell a story, it's a little funky. The dialogue can be a little weird, you know, and the implementation of all the pieces therein in terms of like telling a cohesive film aren't that great. But when it gets down to the nitty gritty and all of a sudden everyone has to fight, you know, Bahamut or something like that, it's like, holy shit, dude, this is super sick. I'm into this shit. In that way, I come to appreciate a bit of Advent Children again in some ways, Because effectively, like, what is the story? It's pretty straightforward. Like, there's a poisonous virus that's happened after the planet got messed up that is making a ton of people sick. Like, the planet is effectively doing it or something like that. There is these weird harbinger sort of characters. Laz, Yazoo, and Kadaj, I think is what their name is. They're not great. They're not great. However, all they propose is like sort of being a vessel for Sephiroth, right? They call him his mimetic legacy. So meaning that as long as Sephiroth genes continue, he can exist in some way, and these characters are essentially like the literal vessels for Sephiroth to come back in some way. And that happens by them getting Genova's head, and all this other stuff happens in between. But it sort of pulls back the problems that I have with the characterization of like, oh, you know, we saved the world, you know, something bad happens to a character, and then they move forward and you know, find their way through it, and like the friendships therein keep them going, you know, at the end of FF7. And then it's just like, no, Cloud wasn't that way. No, Cloud is super depressed. He thinks he's screwed up, and he thinks he's the piece of shit. He's just not good enough. And that's just like, to me, it's just like very kind of like tropey, like, I'm not good enough until I'm good enough, and now I'm really good. You know, it's like, yeah, it just feels like, we kind of lost something. There's a big disconnect here in between FF7 OG story and this one, which is why I very much prefer the characterizations in Remake. I think Remake was the thing I was worried so much about, was like, okay, so the last time we've seen these characters actually like act and emote was in Kingdom Hearts games, and this kind of, and some other weird spin-off shit like Dissidia and stuff. So I was so worried of like, so how are they going to portray these characters? Are they going to be like humans? Or are they going to be sort of like weird FF7 Advent Children characters? And they weren't. It was like, oh my God, like, Jesus, if there's one thing I think FF7 Remake does the best, it isn't just the combat stuff, which is equally amazing. It was the characterizations. Like, all the characters are on point, and it's like, damn, they're better than they ever have been. I can't believe this shit. I love it. I'm looking forward to seeing Advent Children again. My memory of the film is that I really appreciate the action sequences, and as an FF7 fan, it does have some kind of interesting story stuff. But what I really, really, really love about this movie is just how, as like a 21-ish year old when I saw it, when it came out, I was pretty young, right? This movie was wildly influential on me, like super influential. It just felt like everyone loves Final Fantasy VII. And it wasn't just that FF7 fans were into this. I don't know how anybody else was able to keep up with the story, but a ton of people like got interested in Final Fantasy VII because of this movie. Because the movie, for the time, was jaw-dropping, absolutely gorgeous. No CG movie had looked like this shit before. It was bonkers. And later we go on to find out, oh yeah, it was super influential. Like Sakurai and, you know, Marvel directors and tons of people are like, oh yeah, the action sequences in this movie are pretty substantial. I appreciate it for that. But if you want to be like real, man, I think I would give it, like, personally, like a 7 out of 10. Back in the day, it'd have been like a 9 out of 10, dude. 9 out of 10, I would have friggin' loved it. But I think now I'd probably rate it like maybe a 6. Just because it is like, there's so many things about it that like bug me. Although, you know, I haven't seen the complete version, which adds a lot of backstory with Denzel, which is the orphaned kid that Cloud and Tifa are taking care of, right? He gets very little to do in the original movie, but in the expanded version of the movie, they give him actually quite a bit. The complete version is almost an okay movie, but the problem is that it makes it really long, right? It makes it way longer when you have to get all this stuff with Denzel. The thing I'm also very curious about, and this is a nitpick in terms of like visual stuff, I have the Advent Children Blu-rays, you know, the old DVDs, all that kind of stuff. This movie was made in 2005, right? And it was rendered for DVD format. When it came out on Blu-ray, there was a pretty huge disparity. Blu-ray is 1080p, different from the 480p. Maybe it was like 720, but I think it was made in 1080. We got the new scenes that had like the Denzel stuff and all the new sequences they kind of had. They looked way better. It was like, whoa, dude, these new sequences look way crispier, like way better. And then you watch the rest of this 4K Blu-ray, and holy shit, dude, the stuff that came from like the old 2005 didn't get touched up at all. at all. It is really low resolution. So I'm kind of curious by them re-releasing this in theaters if that's going to get any better, because that needs to go through some AI upscaling or something, man. I know all that's happening with like James Cameron's movies right now, and it's a little rough, but I think Advent Children would benefit very much from AI upscaling in some way, just because it is those old sequences in 480p are brutal, man. I'm excited for it. I hope people just go check it out. This is a very limited situation, like February 21st for the English dub, February 22nd for the Japanese sub. And apparently it actually comes with a short like film about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And the short will feature interviews with devs and gameplay footage of the upcoming sequel. So there's like a little like, you know, a little get hyped mother fifers as we are getting ready for Rebirth. So this will be a big one for me, dude. I'm definitely getting tickets as soon as I possibly can. And yeah, I simply can't wait, because as much as the criticisms I have of Advent Children, like I said, insanely influential film on my younger self throughout that 2005 to 2006 time.